This week, Siskel and Ebert review Robert De Niro as Al Capone at war with the Untouchables. A family's strange house guest causes pandemonium in Harry and the Hendersons. And Jack Nicholson wreaks havoc on a New England town in The Witches of Eastwick. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert and the Movie.
Are you ready to go to work? Where are we going? On a liquor rig. Need another man.
Ness? It's very interesting. I found a financial disbursement pattern here which shows me where I get...
You carry a badge?
Yes?
Carry a gun.
Kevin Costner as Treasury Agent Elliot Ness and Chicago cop Sean Connery recruit two more crime busters to get Al Capone in The Untouchables. A classic crime story, now a major motion picture. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. The Untouchable was inspired, of course, by the old TV show, but a real effort has been made to turn this material into an ambitious gangster film. There's a big budget, a lot of impressive locations, an authentic look of the 1930s, and a script by the distinguished playwright David Mamet. So it's too bad that the result is a disappointment, a respectable film that lacks the fire, the passion, and even the humor we might expect from this material. The movie stars Robert De Niro as Al Capone in a performance that does not have the usual De Niro energy. This is a very routine Capone.
Somebody messes with me, I'm going to mess with him. Somebody steals from me, I'm going to say you stole, not talk to him for spitting on a sidewalk.
Kevin Costner is Elliot Ness, the man who vows to bust up Capone's mob, and Sean Connery is the honest Chicago cop who can help him do it. Together they form a strike force known as the Untouchables, federal agents at war with Capone. But first, Connery has to make sure that Ness is tough enough.
If you open the ball on these people, Mr. Ness, you must be prepared to go all the way. Because they won't give up the fight until one of you is dead.
I want to get Capone. I don't know how to get him.
You want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And that's how you get Capone.
That's a good scene, but most of the movie never really gives us a sense of the human qualities of these characters, and it ends up with the usual gangland movie gunfight. You can see in all of those scenes that this is a great-looking movie, and a lot of effort went into it, but it has nothing new or especially interesting to say about Capone, Elliot Ness, or the whole Prohibition period. It's a curiously lifeless film. It's almost as if it were framed and put on the wall, a film in which everything looks okay, but we don't really feel very much, and that's strange because the director, Brian De Palma, usually does a much better job of shaking me up. The Untouchables, for me, was a disappointment.
And not for me at all, and I'm surprised because you say it has nothing new to say about Ness. Well, first of all, it's completely different from the Ness that we know from Robert Stack, who was a stern, tough guy. This is a young, innocent Ness who has to go through these rites of passage with his tutor, basically Sean Connery, in a sensational role, and I'm so glad to see him get that kind of a part to prove that he's such a good actor, in teaching this kid the ropes of how you have to sometimes break the law to get a bad guy. And that's the real moral dilemma of the film, which I find exciting, which gets into issues of capital punishment and what you have to do to get bad guys, which is a subject that's even current today.
Well, I agree with you about Sean Connery, and I like his performance a whole lot. I thought the Elliot Ness character was extremely pale.
He's supposed to be in the beginning.
Well, but also in addition to that, it seemed to me that he was very passive. It seemed to me that he didn't really engage, that the lines were written in such a way as to make him seem so lifeless that we didn't really care as he sat there as this prim, straight arrow coming up with those kind of self-justifying lines.
I thought he's intentionally sweet at the beginning, and then he gets tougher and tougher and starts to hate himself. And as a routine shootout at the end, I thought the shootout at the end of this film even though it is derivative from some classic movies, it's fabulous.
It ripped off Battleship Potemkin, which I thought was hardly necessary. But what did you think about Robert De Niro? Weren't you disappointed? His role seemed to be just in a different unit than the rest of the movie. It was like they cleared the screen, De Niro came on, and then he did his thing, and then he's gone again. He didn't interact, really, with the rest of the film.
This movie isn't about Capone, and I'm glad it isn't about Capone. It's about Ness and this new cop, Jimmy Malone, and I thought that was exciting. So you agree with me about De Niro? You were disappointed, too? No, I just didn't think it was important. I think he did it was a small role, and he did it. Nothing special.
Well, that doesn't sound like what we expect from De Niro.
Yeah, but I think the movie is sensational. Okay. Our next film, and this is a much more gentle film about a monster of sorts, more gentle than Al Capone even. It's about a Bigfoot, or a Sasquatch, you know, the big ape that people have been chasing all over North America for years but can't seem to find. The stuff of legends. Well, in the comedy adventure Harry and the Hendersons, a nice suburban family stumbles upon the real McCoy with a resounding thud. The beast recovers. He's sort of friendly but clumsy. The family takes him in, calls him Harry, but they have to hide him from the neighbors, just like an E.T.
Exercise, I mean. That feels right. Plenty of energy right here.
Well, maybe it's just rotten meat or eggs.
Exactly. No sense standing around breathing it.
Thank you for taking care of little Bob.
What was that?
Ernie's experiment for his science class. He's got one of those gerbils.
Sorry, that's all we can show you, the hand. But just imagine a big ape, you get the idea. The film repeats those comedy scenes and then relies on that old reliable of people trying to capture or destroy Harry, including even a passing bicyclist.
I brought my poor 10-speed to a complete stop, like I always do at stop signs. When out of nowhere, this humongous hairy thing is standing right in front of me, growls, with these enormous fangs and these giant hands. So I grabbed my mace.
What? Mace, you idiot!
Stand back. I didn't really mace him. I was about to be eaten.
Eaten by a vegetarian?
I must admit, I saw this film with an adoring crowd, but I didn't buy that much of the movie. It's no E.T., even though Steven Spielberg served as executive producer of the film. Harry, the ape, reminded me of the big orangutan that is in Clint Eastwood's pal, you know, in Every Which Way But Loose. But that ape was a whole lot funnier, and the way Eastwood related with him was a whole lot funnier than the way this family relates with Harry. They just want to hide him, basically. I don't know, this isn't an offensive movie. Little kids probably will like it. It's just a very manipulative one that anyone who has seen E.T. has seen before and seen done a whole lot better. It's sort of a close call for me, but because the movie is so repetitive, just cute Harry, and then Harry goes boom and destroys the house, that I'm giving it thumbs down.
I was disappointed too, and I agree with you, though, that as a kid's movie, it's a pleasant, probably funny entertainment. But what it lacks is any sense of awe about the fact that there could be a Bigfoot, an unknown creature living out there in the woods, having a mind of its own, a lifestyle of its own, so to speak, if you could talk about Bigfoot's lifestyle, and that he comes into civilization and we can interact with him. We're interacting here with essentially a wind-up toy.
That's
Harry is so cute, so gentle, and so lovable that there is no sense of mystery, no sense of awe, and no belief that he's really Bigfoot.
I think the word that you're talking about is awe, which is what we had with E.T. You held your breath. Here you're watching basically a slapstick sequence.
When we come back, Jack Nicholson stars as a diabolical character who grants the wishes of the Witches of Eastwick.
Are you going to seduce me too?
Witches of Eastwick, and it's based on John Updike's novel about 3 Connecticut housewives who would like a little more excitement in their lives, and they get a lot more than they really bargained for. As the 3 so-called witches, the movie stars here, from left to right, Susan Sarandon, Cher, and Michelle Pfeiffer, who get to thinking one day about what kind of a man they'd like to meet.
A stranger, that would be interesting. A tall, dark prince traveling under a curse.
They say you ought to be careful about what you ask for because you just might get it. And that's what happens to them when a strange man named Darrell Van Horn turns up in town. He's played by Jack Nicholson. This guy has the strange ability to read your mind. He's able to tell each woman exactly what she wants to hear.
Do you know the entire witchcraft scare? I mean, is Christ as far back as the 14th century was started by the medical profession? That's right. They were trying to get midwives out of the childbirthing business. That's what they were. Most of the women that they burned, midwives.
Is that true?
You better believe it. Just another example of male-dominated professional society exploiting females for their own selfish purposes.
And there's that famous Nicholson smirk. Eventually, the three women decide they were happier when they were bored, and they use voodoo to try to get rid of Nicholson.
And, some chocolate chip.
Okay?
What is it?
The Witches of Eastwick is an odd, strange goofball movie, and I liked it a lot. It's not afraid to be eccentric, and it isn't afraid to allow all of its actors to really stretch into the kinds of people we don't see every day.
Yeah, no kidding.
Especially in Eastwick. It's quite possible that no actor except Jack Nicholson in the whole world could have played the role of Darrell Van Horn, certainly quite this way, the devil who comes to live in Eastwick. He has a way of raising those eyebrows and giving us that big, diabolical grin, and we know he's capable of anything, literally. And as for Susan Sarandon, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Cher, they're like a trio. Their timing is wonderful. They're great when they're playing Nicholson's foils, and at the end of the movie, when they get their revenge, you can almost feel the fun they're having. And I had a whole lot of fun, too.
I had a whole lot of fun for, I'd say, about two-thirds of the movie, and Nicholson, I mean, he's a national treasure now. I think he is our biggest star. I think he's going to last for centuries. I mean, he is.
Decades for sure.
When he goes sliding across the bed in his pajamas as the devil, I mean, that's just a beautiful scene. That's just wonderful. Then at the end of the picture, they start to use some special effects and gloppy stuff and twisting bodies and stuff that comes out of horror films. And I felt badly that they did that with Jack Nicholson, because Jack Nicholson doesn't need special effects. I said this about Eddie Murphy in The Golden Child. He is a special effect in himself, and I don't think that he needed all of that glop at the end. Cut that out. I think you got a perfect movie.
Well, they use the special effects, but I don't think they use them the way they use them in horror films. The special effects here are more like a comedic backdrop to what's happening, rather than the subject, which is the case in horror films.
Throw them out, you still got a better picture, right?
But you recommend it, right?
You bet.
Me too. I liked it a lot. Coming up next, we're going to expand our weekly video segment to take you into the back shelves of your local video store, back where it says horror videos, and where kids are devouring some awful films that we call the video nasties.
Orville Redenbacher. If you are a teenager, you may not have heard of the term video nasties or gross-out films. These terms refer to a whole group of pictures full of blood and guts, sometimes real, sometimes fake. And kids are renting them voraciously and holding video nasty parties in their homes to see if they are man enough or woman enough to sit through all this disgusting gore. The trend is so popular that some stores have devoted entire shelves to this gory stuff under the horror label, but this isn't regular horror pictures. This is stuff that is simply blood and guts. And the most popular nasty of them all is a piece of trash called Faces of Death, which purports to be a professor's investigation of death worldwide in his effort, he says, to gain knowledge about the fragility of man. Sure, and I'm the Easter Bunny. The professor is played by an actor who looks like the original absent-minded professor, and what he shows us in Faces of Death are autopsies, murders that were on news programs, and footage, frankly, that no news station would put on because it's too gross. Two couples supposedly cracking open the head of a monkey and eating its brains. Don't worry, we won't show you that scene. But I found a lot of seemingly fraudulent stuff, too, including this tricked-up scene, I think, of a couple feeding a bear in a national park and getting mauled. Don't worry, there are a whole bunch of flash cuts when the attack occurs, which makes the stuff suspect, and there's no gross-out scene here.
Bob, be careful. Be careful, Bob. Bob, be careful. Oh, my God!
Well, I have a lot of questions about that scene. Why could we hear the woman's voice screaming at her husband to back off and then not hear her at all? Especially when he's being attacked. That's when you should hear the woman's voice. Did she stop talking while her husband was being attacked? And then where was that second camera during the attack from the other car? Did the cameraman from the other car, while there's a bear out there mauling some guy, decide, hey, this is a good time, I'll get closer. Maybe I can get mauled too, the dummy. But beyond that is the sickness and shoddiness of this entire film. This is more than just a Halloween party gag. It is truly disgusting and badly made. And of course, the issue which we'll deal with later is the easy access kids have to this material in many video stores.
In the case of a whole lot of these things, and I also looked at Faces of Death Part 2 and Faces of Death Part 3, you get that phantom second camera, because we know that TV crews only send out one camera with on a news event, and then you have the shot of the camera.
Right.
So what did they take that shot with? The Faces of Death was popular enough, as I said, to inspire 2 sequels, and in watching Part 3, in which a man jumps to his death from a building, another one is eaten by guard dogs, and a third one parachutes into an alligator pond, I was truly disgusted.
The most terrible thing that I have ever witnessed was one evening I'd come out on the patio and I see this man coming down in a parachute, and he landed right in the crop pit.
Now, some of that footage looks fake, but what bothered me more was the way these films dwell on human despair in an almost sadistic and almost gleeful way. The actual subject matter of many of these ways of death didn't bother me nearly as much as the fact that the film seems to feel nothing about it. In addition to quasi-documentary movies like Faces of Death, a lot of video stores also rent fiction movies that specialize in blood and gore, movies that go way, way beyond what parents think of as scary Halloween-type films. And especially, these films seem to love to dwell on the sadistic torture of women. One of the worst of these movies is Blood-Sucking Freaks, in which a magician invites people to his home for private shows in which it turns out that the tricks are not tricks, they're real, and women are the victims.
Are you ready to accept my domination?
Blood-Sucking Freaks is filled wall-to-wall with screams, with blood, with nudity, with hopelessness, with helplessness, with violence, and most of all, with venomous hatred of women. I have never seen a movie quite like it. And if I'd seen it when I was 12 or 13, I could only imagine what an effect it might have had on me. It makes death and torture and pain and suffering into unreal things, and along the way, it makes women seem unreal too. They exist in this movie simply to be exposed, tortured, and mutilated. It's hard to believe, and I don't believe, that parents are really aware of what's contained in those films and still let their kids watch them. That's the point of the show, I guess, to say, hey, there's such a thing as a horror film. There's even such a thing as Friday the 13th. But do you know about these nasties that they're selling as a special category to kind of appeal to your kids to show up at pajama parties when the adults are all asleep or next door?
And the ultimate pornography is just what you said, because it's done in the guise of a party.
Yeah.
Let's have fun. And what is the fun? Watch people get cut up, watch people die. And the effect, I'm going to play amateur psychologist, and the effect is that you can confuse pain with entertainment. And when that confusion is made, the whole world is in a lot of trouble.
It made me think of that movie we reviewed a couple of weeks ago called The River's Edge, where one of the teenagers kills his girlfriend and the other kids look around at the body for 3 days without telling the cops, because to them, it's not really real. Coming up next, look at what some video stores are doing to control video nasties, and we'll also offer a few suggestions of our own. Talking about video nasties, the brutal, violent, and sadistic movies that become popular among some young teenage kids who show them at parties as a kind of video game of chicken to see who can keep their eyes open the longest while everybody else is going like this, I hope. Apparently, a lot of parents don't know or don't care how extreme these movies really are, but still we ask the question, how can kids who are only 12 or 13 in some cases gain access to these R-rated or X-rated or even unrated cassettes? The answer a lot of the time is that video stores simply don't care what a movie's rating is, and they'll rent an R-rated movie to almost anybody. But we found some stores that have a policy about renting to kids, and at least one chain named Blockbuster Video uses computers to enforce those ratings.
What we do so that the parent has the prerogative of allowing R-rated rentals for their children or not is we have a section on the application that says additional family card holders under the age of 18 allowed to rent R-rated films, yes or no.
So when the customer comes up to the counter, they hand us their card, and it has a barcode on the back, and the laser gun reads it, and then up on the screen comes their name and the warning, no R rentals for children under 18. It also makes a beeping noise so that the operator's attention is called to it.
Now, we all know the movie rating system is not very well enforced in movie theaters, where teenagers can easily get into R-rated films, and it's enforced even more loosely in video stores. But maybe if parents know about these films of extreme and sadistic violence, maybe they'll take an interest in some kind of enforcement of the R rating, and maybe more video stores will too. I think the blockbuster video approach is a good one. Ask the parents if they want their kids to rent these films.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think that some states have introduced legislation requiring the stores to have the labels on them of the rating. Beyond that, I would say that if you know which store your child frequents, I would go to that store, look for the horror section, you'll see these kinds of films, and see if there are labels on them, and ask the owner. That's the least you can do for your kid, is one visit to the store and ask the owner what to do.
I got another one for you, Gene. It's very hard for a kid to rent a video unless he has $79 because you have to put down some kind of a deposit for the value of the video. Therefore, most kids are renting against the guarantee of their parents' credit cards, so all the parents have to do is not register the credit card in a store that doesn't enforce the ratings.
That's a good idea, or otherwise people are going to demand legislation. So much for video nasties. Let's review the new movies on this show. Roger and I really split on The Untouchables. I thought it was the best American gangster film I had seen since The Godfather and Once Upon a Time in America. Roger, however, found too many lifeless characters, so one thumb up, way up, and one thumb down. We agreed that Harry and the Hendersons did not hold our interest. Maybe little ones will like it, but this big one didn't. 2 thumbs down. And finally, we agreed on Witches of Eastwick, Roger liking it more than I did. We both, however, admired Jack Nicholson tremendously. 2 thumbs up.
With a couple of exceptions, Jack Nicholson throughout his career has been the guarantee that if he's in a movie, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and
not infallible, but he's up around 95%.
And I want to say The Untouchables is a sensational gangster picture. I think you're off the mark.
Okay, that's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with reviews of 4 new movies, including Arnold Schwarzenegger in the science fiction adventure Predator, and Martin Sheen in the occult thriller The Believers. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.